The Havok preview tool is essential for testing and refining your cloth configurations. This video will go through the recommended workflow for using the tool, including basic setup and best practices, using Havok version 2025.1. The remote preview tool can be run in two ways, from inside the cloth setup tool or in a standalone window. We recommend using the preview tool from within the cloth setup tool, especially if you're new to Havok cloth. To start showing a preview of your asset, press Preview at the top. This loads the asset in the Runtime Preview tab. There is no default camera in our scene, so let's press Zoom All at the bottom to center the asset on our screen. First, make sure the cloth tools are showing on the left. If they are missing, press the Toggle Simulation Controls button to open the panel on the right, if not already showing. Go to the Cloth tab and enable Show Cloth Tools. The Cloth Tool menu will appear on the left. Press the Toggle Simulation Controls button again to close the menu and give you more space to work. The Runtime Preview tool exists as a playground to make temporary changes to your cloth setup. When you decide to keep certain changes, you need to set them in the Property Editor on the left and hit Ctrl+S or the Save button at the top of the screen to save your changes. We recommend using an AABB comparison when editing cloth. This allows you to have multiple versions of an asset showing in the Preview tool at once to accurately compare the changes in behavior. To set this up, go to Cloth Entity Manager, Add Entity, and press the Add Entity button. I'm going to press Zoom All again to see both models in the scene. We're going to be making some changes to the cape, so I'd like these assets to be standing side by side at a slight angle to get a good view. Go back to Cloth Entity Manager and open Transform. In the Entity dropdown, select the asset that you want to move. You can enable the AABB checkbox to draw a box around the selected character to make sure you're using the right one. First, I'll rotate the asset, and that looks about right. And I'll translate it along the x-axis to be closer to the other model. The coordinate system can be seen in the bottom right of the preview tool. Then I'll select the second model and rotate that to match. Now we have our assets set up, collapse the Cloth Entity Manager and expand Cloth Tweaker. The Entity field shows which entity we're on. The Cloth field shows the piece of cloth. SimCloth selects the cloth simulation we're currently editing. For this short layered cape asset, there are two sim cloths, one for the short layer on top, the other for the longer cape. The changes we make here are only related to the selected sim cloth. So select Short Cape Sim. If we open SimCloth Simulation, we can make changes to the gravity in the preview tool. Since Short Cape Sim is selected when we reduce the gravity, only the short cape is affected. Hit Reset Simulation to return to your original settings. Change the sim cloth to Cape Sim to select the longer cape, and change the gravity again. As you can see, only the longer cape is affected. The short cape on top maintains the original gravity. The Runtime Preview tool can be used to test both new aesthetic and behavioral cloth values. So let's look at tweaking the cloth aerodynamics. Expand Wind Settings, change Wind Type to Aerodynamic. This means the wind type will take into account all the settings that we are going to set in Wind Properties. Set Wind Active to On. From Wind Properties, we can see all the different settings related to the simulation, and your cloth will now be affected by the wind. You can change the strength and direction of the wind in this Wind Properties section. Below this is Tweak SimCloth Aerodynamics. Expand this menu and the Aerodynamics menu. The main factors for cloth are shown here with drag, lift, and surface density variables. The surface density is a core setting. A higher value means the wind will have less of an effect on the cloth, and if you go too low, you can see the simulation start to behave weirdly. A high surface density would be used for a heavier material like linen or leather, and a low surface density would be for silk or tulle. When you find the settings that you like, they must be set in the Property Editor to save them. Let's save this new surface density. We find the corresponding property in the Property Editor. In this case, it's SimCloth, Cape Sim SimCloth, Advanced Options, Particle Force Interaction, Surface Density, and change the surface density to match. Make sure to hit Ctrl+S or the Save button at the top to save your changes. I've now switched to the ROY model that's available in the samples. You can also add animations to the asset in the Remote Preview tool. Go to File, Add, select a Havok resource file to add to source scene, mail_idle.hkt, and hit Open. The run animation setting should be enabled by default, so we can see the idle animation immediately. You can also drag and drop the HKT file onto the character in the preview tool. Animations come with their own range of settings to play with, so let's take a look at changing the simulation damping. Go to Cloth Tweakers, Tweak Settings, Sim Cloth, Simulation, Damping. Damping is a force that opposes the motion of an object, so it makes the animation come to rest sooner. You can move the cloth in the scene by pressing the spacebar and moving your mouse. This will pick at the cloth and move it in the direction your mouse moves. And now change the damping to a very high value and a low value. The Runtime Preview tool is also used for debugging purposes. A common use is debugging constraint issues. So let's take a look at modifying the constraint stiffness. Go to Cloth Tweaker, Sim Cloth, Constraint Stiffness, and expand the Constraint Stiffness submenu. Here you can see the 5 main kinds of constraints on this piece of cloth. To learn more about constraints or any other option in the Cloth Setup tool, click on the option in the tool itself and press F1. This will open a context-sensitive help. Also, every field in the Cloth Setup tool contains detailed tooltips. There are cases where constraints can fight against each other, with different constraints pulling the cloth into various unexpected and unwanted positions. It can be painful to pin down what's happening and which constraints are causing the issue. We recommend using a process of elimination to find the origin of the problem. Let's take a look at this pre-made asset where we have problem constraints. Go to the Constraint Stiffness settings. Each constraint field in the preview tool shows the strength of that constraint's effectiveness in the runtime preview on a scale of 0 to 1. 1 means we're seeing the constraint's full effect. 0 means the constraint is turned off. We'll reduce the stiffness of each constraint to 0, one at a time until we find the problem. And from reducing volume constraint, we can see it behaving better already. Let's open the volume constraint setting and remove the override to return to default, which fixes our constraint issue. This is a simple example, but the same process can be used in much more complicated circumstances to figure out which constraint is causing the issue. The runtime preview also contains cloth viewers, which show you debug information about your setup. Go to Cloth Viewers, Cloth, Simulation, Constraint. We'll look at local range. Local range constraints help confine the movement of cloth particles to a desired shape. By default, the Show Constraint Shape viewer is enabled. This shows the volume associated with that constraint, and we can disable this viewer at the checkbox. And enable Show Reference Buffer. This shows the reference vertices for this constraint. There are lots of different constraints to play with, and lots of information that you can visualize using these tools. When you're finished, you can turn off all viewers with the Disable All Cloth Viewers button. You can also isolate the simulating cloth in the scene by going to Cloth World, World Rendering, Purely Skinned Cloth Meshes, and select Off. This removes the render meshes not affected by the cloth simulation, leaving you only with the simulating assets. The Runtime Preview tool has a wide range of other functionality for testing and tweaking every element of your cloth, and you can find more information in the documentation. Ideally, the cloth tweaking tools would be integrated into your engine, which would then allow you to tweak all of these properties without having to return to the Cloth Setup tool. This integration is already provided in the Havok Cloth for Unreal products and can be made compatible with any engine that Cloth is integrated into. These tweaks can also be saved out to file and applied at a specific time in-game. This is especially helpful when modifying cinematics or for when a character moves to different environments. For example, you can tweak the constraint stiffness and gravity and load that file in for the cloth simulation when a character goes underwater. Using the cloth tweaker from within an engine can significantly speed up your workflow, and we'd recommend you checking it out. For more information on how the remote preview tool can enhance your experience creating cloth simulations, check out our documentation or reach out to your account manager.